let's talk about benchmarks. And Alex, I'm going to ask you to lead this. So on this chart here, we're seeing a couple of benchmarks. Of course, Humanity's Last Exam and the Amy 25 benchmark comparing Grok 4 Heavy, Gemini 2.5 Pro, the O3 Pro, GPT-5, and GPT-5 Reasoning. The question, of course, is where are these numbers for GPT-5 coming from? Are they validated and do we believe them? But if we do, GPT-5 is going to outrace everybody. So take me through this, Alex, if you would.
Sure. Well, I want to draw inspiration maybe from the spirit of Ray Kurzweil, who famously mentioned that when the Human Genome Project was 1% completed, that it was actually 50% time-wise
Yes.
completed. I think that the same notion likely applies here. Whereas some might say, okay, look at humanity's last exam. Well, we're approaching 50% on some of these purported strongest but unreleased models. I look at that and then I look at, say, models that are achieving only 20% on humanity's last exam, and I say we're most of the way towards fully saturating these benchmarks. I think the real story here, both on this slide and also the next slide. So on this slide, we have humanity's last exam and this year's Amy, the Olympiad exam. And then I think if we can jump around, so Google Proof question answering and SWE-bench software engineering bench, these are all saturating. We're running out of benchmarks. We're running out of evals that test frontier capabilities. That I think in my mind is the headline story. We need really hard evals now. Going back also to the point about LM Arena and the poly market, we need much harder benchmarks to understand and to differentiate between frontier capabilities. And the industry, I think, is essentially starved of those frontier benchmarks.
Well, the other thing we need so badly is brilliant people like you to tie this into human good. You know, if you said when I get to HLE 50, 60, 75, what does that mean for solving all disease? What does that mean for discovering new physics? What does that mean? Because it directly connects, and we know intuitively it directly connects, but it's really mentally challenging to say, okay, what's the timeline? How does it roll out? All the stuff that takes it from just a test to the real world. That's just a great use of mind power.
Totally agree. And just maybe quick thought on that.
Yeah.
I would argue that what we're sorely missing as an industry and as a research community are benchmarks that measure the ability of frontier models to solve open problems. This, when I see all of these charts, including pulling out the purported GPT-5 benchmarks, I see saturating benchmarks. I would like to see benchmarks that address open challenges, and I think those are the next frontier.
Yeah, I love that. Two thoughts here. The first is there's going to be a point at which these models are solving problems that we can't even understand, and it's impossible for us to create the benchmarks in terms of closed benchmarks. But I agree with you, Dave. I mean, why aren't our benchmarks like which is the model helping us, double human lifespan? Which is the model helping us create the most, the highest efficiency fusion capabilities of the models? I mean, basically, models being driven to create this future world of abundance. I mean, this is some of the work that Imad Mustaq speaks about with his intelligent internet. But, it's interesting that people tend to gravitate towards competitions and steer long-term decisions towards competitions, whether it's making more money or getting an Oscar, whatever the case might be. Why don't we use as the benchmarks the things that up-level humanity and get companies and teams to focus on doing those things?
And that Peter, I would say in a nutshell, that's what we're, I think, about to see in the next 2 or 3 years. Call it abundance bench or abundance benchmarking. And the more abundance-oriented benchmarks we see, I would predict within 2 to 3 years of the benchmarks, if they can be mechanically verified by benchmarking organizations, you'll see a lot of those problems get solved by AI.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I need to write a newsletter on this front
Yeah.
because what we measure matters, and it also influences where people spend their money, time, and their egos. Dave, you were going to say?
Well, no, I would love to see that newsletter sooner rather than later because, we never used to interact with the top politicians in the world. Now they all want to know about AI. And so we have access to the State House, to the White House. And if you can't tie it to human outcomes, then you don't get the voters. And historically, we didn't think in terms of voters, right? We thought in terms of AI progress. How does it benefit the world bottom up? But now everybody wants to know, what does this mean for me? And who's going to figure that out if it's not, between you doing everything related to healthcare, and space, and then Alex doing everything related to science, physics, technology, that who else is going to figure this out if not you guys? And
Yeah.
so if we can just tie it to, like, when will cancer be cured? What type of cancer? When will housing be solved? What will be the new economics? Ahmad actually has to figure out the new economics. But this is the place we got to figure all those things
These
out.
are effectively having AI solve the X prizes of the future. I'm curious if you're listening here or watching as one of our subscribers. I'd love to know your thoughts. What benchmarks, in terms of abundance benchmarks, should we be creating? Yeah, drop a note and share with us your thoughts on this. So speaking of Imad, here we go. Imad Mustak believes AGI is here. So I'll just read his tweet. It says AGI is already here. All the components exist. We just need to stitch them together. 2 years ago, who would have said an international math Olympic gold medal and topping benchmarks isn't AGI? So Alex, you've been saying this for a while. I remember our first conversations. I'm saying, when are we going to reach AGI? You said, Peter, it's kind of here already. You were way
That's
ahead
right.
of everybody else. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, I would take the position that AGI has arguably been here since at the very latest summer of 2020, and that we're 5 years into AGI. I picked summer of 2020 because in May of 2020, OpenAI released the GPT-3 paper that language models are few-shot learners. And that was the first time that I think the notion that in-context learning, that you could pose a task within the context window of a language model and have the language model learn uh, in the moment, just in time. That was the first time that that seemed to actually work. One could even look further back at early language models that were based on tuples and smoothing tuples back decades. But I think when we look back from with the benefit of hindsight, we will say this was a more or less a smooth exponential. There was no singular moment,
Mm-hmm.
no before and after. It's just a smooth exponential of compressing human knowledge and compressing world knowledge. And I've drawn the analogy also that the idea that AI arguably inevitably is the result of compressing knowledge, in the same sense that fusion power and other physical phase transitions are just the result of compressing matter, basically
Really, really
inevitable.
glad you said that because, history is always written in hindsight, right? It's never written in the moment. And 2020 is a very memorable, easy year for the history books to write down. But I think what you said is dead right. If you take the exact GPT-3 algorithm set and scale the heck out of it, it reaches AGI. So nothing needed to change from that 2020 innovation era to today, other than much, much more compute, huge data centers, big GPUs. And so then how would you say the birth of AGI was anything other than that moment in time? And so I think
Mm,
that'll stick.
amazing. I
Yeah,
love that.
we just didn't realize it at the
Continuous.
time, obviously, but or you did, but nobody else did.
I love that idea.